Diversification done differently, a plenary session. I'll wait another 2 minutes or so just to get the crowd in, and we'll try and start at about 10 past. I'm not going to go up to the stand. I'll just talk from here. It's easy for me. You have to go there, but I'll just talk from here. Well, again, good morning and welcome to the plenary session on co-products. When we're looking at trying to do something a bit for the co-product section, we thought of various themes. And one of the themes that has been in this ISSCT Congress for the plenary has been using the word differently. So when we came to look at this particular session, we decided on trying to do something that is a bit different and is a bit out there. So the speakers today are going to be presenting something that is possibly outside of the box, and for that, I hope you will enjoy the talks today. The first speaker today is going to be Professor Narendra Mohan, and he's going to be talking on importance of diversification and integration in the Indian sugar industry. So I'll just give a bit of a brief background on Professor Narendra Mohan. He is the present director of the National Sugar Institute in Kanpur, India. Professor Mohan is an inspiring teacher, admirable research worker, and an esteemed government official who has a long and distinguished career of working in the sugar industry and at the Institute. An author of 6 books, more than 150 papers, been published in various reputed journals, and many patents to his credit, which indicates his passion for innovative work. Professor Narendra Mohan has played a pivotal role in converting sugar industry into a clean and green industry producing bioenergy, biochemicals, and other bioproducts apart from sugar. Professor Mohan is associated with many prestigious international scientific societies and journals and has traveled extensively to Switzerland, Indonesia, Nigeria, France, Kenya, Thailand, Egyptian, Iran, and a few more countries, and delivers lectures and provides technical consultancy. Professor Mohan, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and my fellow panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you. So I'm going to discuss something on the way Indian sugar industry has advanced over the last couple of years. The Indian sugar industry, which began around 120 years back, had many challenges over the run. Any industry can have all those challenges of viability, economic sustainability. But I think this problem was more prone to Indian sugar industry, and it encountered, often the ups and downs of sugar production, viability, competitiveness, sustainability, and all that. To the extent that the government of India had to come into picture to protect the interest of all the stakeholders, not only the millers, but the farmers and the common consumer as well. However, learning from experience, we have made many changes to the system, and perhaps now we are speaking on modeling of the Indian sugar industry, the strategies which are to be taken care, and how to make this industry very competitive, viable, and economically sustainable. We are also talking about this industry to be self-dependent. The vision of the Honorable Prime Minister, the Atmanirbhar Bharat or the Atmanirbhar Chini Udyog, the self-dependent India and the self-dependent Indian sugar industry. So to begin with, my presentation, because I do have the limitation of the time, so I'm going to discuss only a few things on that one. The outline of my presentation, the flow will be introduction, the importance of diversification and integration, which today we are talking about. And to diversification, I have to begin with the sugar quality and the production of the specialty sugars with focus on environment-friendly and consumer-friendly packaging, the value-added products which we can have from the byproducts or the co-products from the sugar industry, looking to converting waste to resource or waste to wealth, and my concluding remarks on that one. Friends, you know every industry is customer-oriented or customer-driven, and sugar industry is no exception. There is always immense potential to cut cost and to take industry forward if you invest wisely, if you have got the proper strategies and the business models with you. For the sugar industry in India, we have seen that we are required to take a shift from the conventional system making sugar alone of a particular quality, making sugar of different qualities, keeping in view the consumer preferences and the market dynamics, and then to look into the exploitation of the entire sugarcane value chain, the co-products, the byproducts, or converting waste to wealth. As we see today, and this is our experience over the last couple of years, and I always quote, the Indian sugarcane industry is an industry of glorious opportunities. You have to exploit the potential by forming the strategies for formulation of the business models and to innovate. We can come out with many bio-based products, innovative products, and which can give an impetus to the sustainability of the Indian sugar industry, generating more and more revenue streams, not banking upon the revenues from the sugar only. If you ask me what is the importance of the diversification, to me diversification, or anybody who is having any concerns or any insight to the Indian sugar industry will speak for economic sustainability, viability, and competitiveness. We need more and more products. We need more and more value-added products from the Indian sugar industry. The reason number one is because our sugarcane costs are higher, our sugar prices are higher, the cost of production of the sugar is higher, and sometimes we are not very competitive. The sugar prices are also volatile on and off because of the various internal and external factors, so you cannot bank upon the revenues from the sugar only. Number two, because once you are exploiting the sugarcane value chain and you are looking into innovative products from the byproducts of the sugar industry, you generate more revenue, you make sugar industry more sustainable. Number three, the byproducts. We do have many byproducts talking about converting waste to resource or waste to wealth, for which we have to have the innovative approach and so that we can widen our revenue base. And in fact, we look into sugar industry for converting it from a standalone sugar factory to agribusiness complex to a biorefinery. This is the importance of the diversification or value additions. If you talk to us around 5 decades back, we were just making sugar, nothing more than that, selling the primary byproducts as such. No utilization of the bagasse for any power generation or molasses for ethanol production or press cake for any biocomposting or for any CBG production. We were hugely dependent upon from the revenues from the sugar. The revenues from the sugar were to the extent of 80%, 90%, and only 10% of the revenues were from other sources. There was a change, there was a shift in the business model, and we started exploiting the potential of the bagasse, going in for cogeneration and export of the power. This helped a little bit. Our revenues from the sugar were 80%, and 20% used to come from other sources like biocomposting, some amount of the ethanol, and power generation too. So this is, the second model which I'm showing is something about converting sugar industry into a hub of green energy, where we are talking about power exports, we are talking about ethanol, and then having the sugar as well. So now 80% of the revenues are coming from sugar, and 20% of the revenues are coming from other sources, largely from ethanol and cogeneration. And we are looking for a biorefinery concept where we are going to have only 70% of the revenues from sugar, and 30% revenues are supposed to come from other sources, other value-added products. So this way we can reduce our dependency on sugar, and we can have more revenue streams from other value-added products. So if anything goes wrong with the prices of the sugar or with the dynamics of the sugar production, at least we do have a cushion, and we can expect that Indian sugar industry is going to be stable and sustainable. The strategies maybe, to begin with, one area which is still to be exploited is about sugarcane juice preservation, which we are, not talking a lot, because in India's context, a lot of people and the common consumer are very keen on consuming the sugarcane juice as a health drink. And today, if we can do something, because there are two issues. One is the common consumer is not very keen to take the sugarcane juice because it is extracted by the vendors in a rather unhygienic conditions, and then you do have the sugarcane for any part of the year. So if we can do something from the point of the view of sugarcane juice preservation, I think we are going to come out with a healthier drink from the sugar industry. And we can compete with all the cold drinks which we do have in the domestic market or elsewhere in the globe. Now coming to the other points which are relevant in India's context, and maybe a reference to other countries too who are into production of the sugar. There is a major shift now, and we are very vocal from the last couple of years on why we are still continuing with the plantation white sugar process, making the double sulfitation process, using double sulfitation process, and not going for a cleaner process and which can fetch a good quality of the sugar, exploring the international markets also, and particularly keeping in view that 60% of the 60% of the sugar which we produce in the country goes to the bulk consumers like beverage industry, confectionery industry, the pharmaceutical industry, so on. So we have to look into this aspect, and I'm happy to inform you that around 15% of the Indian sugar factories have converted their process from plantation white sugar to raw refined root. Then it opens new areas for making value-added sugars, various specialty sugars, and particularly after the COVID has given us many learnings, and out of those learning, one learning is about the safe packaging, the safe food from farm to fork, and any packaging which is environment friendly and consumer friendly. So we are looking into more and more consumer packagings from the Indian sugar industry. The common consumer is also sure about the hygienic conditions and the weight of the sugar which they are getting. And on the other hand, the sugar industry is getting a premium over the consumer packing which they are having now. Cogeneration of power, and beyond that we have to look into, because I'm going to speak something on that. Bagasse is not meant only for the burning purposes to be used as a fuel, but we can have many more value-added products from the bagasse. And then CBG, which we are discussing from the last couple of days. There is a fantastic scheme from the government of India, but there are certain challenges. So how to overcome those challenges, and how to see that we can have more and more green energy from the Indian sugar industry. Ethanol has been the game changer for Indian sugar industry over the last 3-4 years. So we have to look into different models of the diversion of the sugar to have the sugar balance, the consumption and the demand and the production, basically the sugar balance, and making more ethanol available to the country for ethanol blending program, and to serve two more sectors of the potable liquor and the chemical sector. Value additions, utilizing various byproducts in an innovative manner, which I'm going to discuss in short, and converting waste to wealth. This all aims at making this industry viable and sustainable in times to come. Sugar quality is always very important for all of us. And as I said, now we are having the sugar which is not merely the plantation white sugar, but we are eyeing on sugar which is raw sugar and the refined sugars, and refined sugar we are having different kind of the specialty sugars. If we talk about the specialty sugars, I think in this panel only, Dr. Autrey is going to speak a lot on the specialty sugars which we have from the Mauritius. But Indians market, they require various kind of the specialty sugars, and we have to cater to the niche market also. I have seen, a lot of demand coming from the markets regarding liquid sugars, icing sugars, because we have seen a spurt in the confectionery units and the bakery units. So there is a lot of demand of the liquid sugar, icing sugars, the natural cane sugar. And then, we can have different type of the flavored sugars as well, which we are not talking right now in a in some length or all that. But all these flavored sugars are very much required for making various bakery recipes and candy making and for many more applications. So one is about specialty sugar, which are required for various sectors, maybe the confectionery units, bakery units, pharma sugars, liquid sugar, and so on. Then comes the flavored sugars, and then to, remove the tag, talking about the sugar and health. We had a session on that one. There is a myth about sugar consumption and its effect on human health. So we can come out with some healthier sugars from the sugar industry. We may be talking about the low GI sugars or the fortified sugars as well. So with this concept of value additions, sometimes we say making sugar from the sugar cane is not profitable, but making different kinds of the sugar from the sugar is profitable. So this is the, strategy which I am talking about. These are the different kind of the sugars which we are talking about, not merely making the white sugar, but making different kind of the sugars which are sector specific. Jaggery we are discussing particularly from the last couple of years during the post-COVID area and during the COVID also. During this ISCT session, we also discussed something about the jaggery as half done or half baked or half cooked, or having a nutritional value and a sweetener which has got some medicinal value too. So India has always been hub of jaggery production, and during the post-COVID scenario also, we are talking a lot on jaggery to be consumed as a sweetener which has got a medicinal value. Traditionally, we are producing jaggery, and jaggery has been, to the extent of 65 to 70% of the total production of the world. And out of the jaggery which we produce, 40% of the jaggery we are exporting to various other countries. So the CAGR, if you look into the CAGR, which is projected from 2022 to 2027, it shows a growth of around 14%. This is good enough by any stretch of imagination. The only thing which we have to look into, as far as the jaggery is concerned, we have to look for hygienic processing. And my tagline would be the non-chemical jaggery produced under hygienic conditions, and it should have a proper packaging to have the proper shelf life. So this is the product which we are talking a lot on, to bank upon and to have more revenues, because sometimes the prices of the jaggery are much higher than the prices of the sugar also. Looking to the sugarcane value chain, there may be a theoretical approach, because if you refer to any Patrao, any Rain, or any PJ Manohar Rao, you can find a tree where you can have n number of the products once you are talking about the, the sugarcane value chain. But to be practical, the practical approach would be to look into the market, to look into the technology, to look into the competitiveness, what you can have from the sugarcane. So my practical approach would be, or the industry's practical approach is to have, some products which do have the market, for which we do have the technology, the assured market, assured technology, and the viability. So these are the few products which I have shown. They do have the market in India, and we do have the technology, the indigenous technology. So I will discuss only few of them because of the paucity of the limitation of the time. So going right now directly to the value additions, if I look into the bagasse, sometimes I don't look at bagasse as bagasse, but I look into the bagasse as a, having three different constituents like cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. Every component, every constituent has got its own value. So that way we have to look into the bagasse, but yes, on a broader, canvas, we have to look into majorly to be used as a fuel, but It can, enter into the healthcare industry also. We can have more of the dietary fibers from it. Pulp and paper, eco-ware, crockery, biochemicals like graphene oxide, vanillin, alkyl limonades, glycosides. So many things you can have from the bagasse. So the area is open and you have to innovate and you have to put technology at place to have the value-added products and to diversify. Coming to another one, the tableware crockery, because I'm going to discuss only few of the products which do have the mass consumption and where you can have the opportunity to utilize bagasse on a mass scale. The tableware cutlery from bagasse is, the consumption is growing because we do have a ban on the single-use plastic. And as you know, my fellows from the country, they know that we are not having any more cutlery, the disposable cutlery made from the plastics or from the thermocoals. So we have to resort to some crockery which is made from the agro waste, something like, bagasse. So we do have a tremendous market. And fortunately, now we do have around 20 plants in India working on the pulp which has been made from the bagasse. So it gives you an opportunity to convert a part of the saved bagasse, because fortunately now we do have sugar factories in India which are having fantastic steam consumptions, talking about refineries working on 30% of the steam consumption, or double sulfitation plant working on 26 or 28% of the steam consumption. So you are saving a lot of bagasse, and if your power tariffs are not good enough to be viable, then you can switch over and you can think of various other opportunities like making compostable crockery from the bagasse. Another, the product which can be from the sugar industry, and already we do have few sugar factories going in for production of the particle board, because we do have our concerns for the environment too. We do have our social obligations to fulfill. So if you can reduce the, the cost, the cutting of the trees and reduce the use of the timber, you can replace all that timber with your bagasse, and you can have, particle board from the bagasse also. You can see the particle board market and the revenue share. Basically, you require it for the construction work. You can use it for the furniture, infrastructure, and for many other purposes. And again, that if you look into the Indian market, you look into the annual growth, it is around 11%, more than 11% if you move from 2019 to 2024. So by any stretch of imagination, you are having another product which you can have from the sugar industry. You can have the value addition, and for which you have technology at place, and you do have the market. Fine. So moving beyond sanitizers, because the sugar industry has played its role during the COVID times, and we entered into healthcare industry, talking about doing something good with the human health. So you can be into the nutraceuticals as well, and talking about dietary fibers, which you can have from the bagasse. If you look into the global market value, it was around $5 billion US dollars in 2019, and the global market is expected to be more than $12 billion by 2026. So again, you are having a fantastic CAGR of more than 12%, and you do have a market which is in demand. Already, I've shown few packets of the bagasse or the dietary fibers which have been made from the bagasse. So this is another product, and once we are not earning a very good name for the sugar, at least we can bring some such products which can take care of the health of the common consumer, and we can earn a good name. Thus, yes, we are with you, and we are coming out with many healthier products from the Indian sugar industry or from the sugar industry across the globe. So dietary fiber is again a product which we can bank upon, which we can eye on, and the technology is not a rocket science. You can always produce the dietary fiber, and you can come out with this product. Molasses, largely we speak today on ethanol blending program because our requirements are enormous. We have to cope up with the requirement of 10,000 million liters of the ethanol by 2025 to make 20% of the blending a success. But we have to look into two more sectors. The sectors are the potable liquor sector and the chemical sector, where we have to cope up with their requirements too. So we need more than around, I can say more than 13,000 million liters of the alcohol per year for meeting the requirements of all the three sectors. We are looking for molasses to be used as an edible molasses, which many countries are doing, which has got some nutritional value too. Looking for high-value chemicals from molasses and the ethanol. Converting waste to resource, the ash which we are getting from the incineration boilers, because we have to run our distilleries on the molasses-based distilleries on zero liquid discharge. So whatever ash we are getting containing 15 to 22% of the potash, so we can convert this all ash into a potash-rich fertilizer, because potash is an imported item for the country. Cattle feed, and also, this is being used, the molasses is being used for making the baker's yeast. This is the diversification model, because we have to create a balance between the demand and supply. We are having more of the sugar and we need less of the sugar. We have less of the crude oil, we need more of the ethanol. So to draw a balance, we have suggested, and the industry, depending upon the availability, depending upon the infrastructure, depending upon the local conditions, has followed different routes for sacrificing the sugar and making available more and more ethanol. Lastly, coming to filter cake by and large was not having any values. Sometimes it was a problematic area. The disposal was a problematic area, but with the advent of the zero liquid discharge concept, the Central Pollution Control Board necessitated it that you have to go in for zero liquid discharge. So the molasses-based distilleries came out with biocomposting using filter cake from the sugar factories and spent wash, mixing the two and preparing the biocomposts. One thing which more we can take out may not be commercially viable right now, but we have to look into the economics of the same, is about the cane wax. And the filter cake, now we are talking about production of the compressed biogas, and for which I have already spoken, the government of India has come out with a scheme, which is the SATAT scheme, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, the sustainable alternative towards affordable transportation. The prices which I have quoted, maybe, I have found some revision, but this is a scheme where by 2023, the requirement of 40% of the current requirement can be met from these sources, and we are aspiring for around 5,000 CBG plants producing up to 15 million metric tons of the CBG. So sugar industry has a role to play, and sugar industry can contribute for a cleaner and greener energy by utilizing the filter cake and making compressed biogas or the compressed, biomethane. We can have different models of the utilization of the biogas or the bio-CNG, the small-scale biogas or the CBG plants, maybe for the cooking, heating purposes, the cluster of the houses, community kitchens and all that, or the escalated bio-CNG plants can be for the industrial uses, where we are looking for use of the RNGs or the CBGs for driving the vehicles. So the tagline is, go green. Lastly, coming to waste to resource, we had some discussion earlier in some of the sessions about how we can take out something out of nothing. This is something, something like we are taking out something out of the nothing. To me, the waste is there is nothing like waste. This is my inefficiency to take out the potential which it has got. So the recovery of the CO2 from the fermenters is an area of, where we can capture something and where we can earn some revenues. I was discussing with some of the delegates earlier, and earlier we had some papers and the patents also, because in refineries we are having the carbonation process also, where we are using the lime sucrate and the CO2 gas from the flue gases of the chimneys. So now we are having the integrated distilleries with us, where the CO2 content in the fermenter gases is much higher. So can we use this CO2 gas from the distillery fermenters, and can we go ahead with the the carbonation process in the refineries, not drawing any CO2 from the flue gases, instead using CO2 gases from the fermenters of the integrated distilleries. So this is again a food for thought. We have already conducted few experiments. My fellows have also conducted few experiments on drawing the CO2 gas from the fermenters and using it as a clarificant, not drawing any CO2 from the boiler chimney. So that way, capturing CO2 from fermenter is an area where we have to work upon, and can we use it as a clarificant for melt clarification in the sugar refineries. Spent wash generated, I have already spoken that we are trying to take out the potash which it has got, because potash is a 100% import item for all of us, and the annual requirement is estimated to be around 4 million metric tons. So we can save a lot of foreign exchange, and another step in making sugar industry sustainable and the Atmanirbhar Bharat, or the self-sustainable India. So this way we can have more and more technologies to make the sugar industry sustainable. So to conclude and to honor the timelines also, we need a cohesive effort. We need a cohesive effort towards a very competitive, sustainable, and vibrant sugar industry. We have to look into for diversifications, not talking about one quality of the sugar, but different qualities of the sugars, keeping an eye on what is happening at the ground floor, what is happening at the, at the consumer level, the market dynamics and all that. And accordingly, we have to produce the sugar. It should not be like apple to oranges. It should be apple to apple or orange to orange. So that makes sense. If you produce sugar quality, keeping in view the market requirements, maybe the domestic market or the export obligations, you have to produce sugar according to those qualities. The essence of success is attitude. Any value addition, any diversification will happen only once you do have the attitude. So important is attitude, the first alphabet of the series, A, attitude. If you have the attitude, there is nothing impossible, because impossible has got possible in it. So thank you very much, all of you, for hearing me, and thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Thank you, Professor Narendra Mohan. Every time I come to India, I get so impressed by what you're doing here, and particularly on the diversification, and India must be one of the world leaders as far as that goes. If you could just, the plan is that we're going to have all three speakers go, and then after that we're going to have a question and answer session. The next speaker is Dr. Barbara Muir, who has a PhD in organic chemistry from the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. She started her career in the sugar industry at the Sugar Milling Research Institute in Durban, South Africa, as a senior research officer, where she worked for 8 years. Barbara then moved to England to work as part of the operational team in one of the British sugar factories in Lincolnshire, getting her first exposure to the beet sugar industry. At 7 years in the operation, she is now back in R&D for the last 5 years at the Tereos Corporate Technology Center in Belgium. And she continues to work in support and innovation in both cane and beet sugar factories. The title of her talk is called Co-Products in the Beet Sugar Industry. And the reason we asked Barbara to do the plenary was because we wanted to look at diversification done differently, and we need to see what our friends in the beet sugar industry are doing. So hopefully she'll bring us a different perspective from the cane sugar industry. And we thank Barbara for her talk today. The floor is yours, Barbara.
Thank you, Brian. I was quite impressed that I was able to produce something at this conference that has almost nothing to do with sugarcane technology. So let's see how that goes. I will be focusing on co-products in the beet sugar industry, and I'm really hoping that this will give you some ideas about diversification in your own areas. So in a nutshell, my talk will very quickly look at beet sugar, not into too much details. Then we'll look at the current co-products that is existing in the factories. And then emerging co-products and almost the trends that is currently shaping the industry. This is what beet looks like on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is a happy farmer. The beet, you can see, grows under the ground, actually, so it comes to the factory with a lot of soil, and that is one of the byproducts, actually. The tops and the top of the beet and the leaves is cut off during the harvesting process, and this is left in the field. So let's have a look at the conventional products. Just some facts. Sugar beet is grown from seed. It is a biennial plant, so it actually grows for 2 years to get to full maturation and to make seeds. But we are lucky that it reaches full, or sucrose, the maximum sucrose, within 7 to 9 months, and this is therefore the growing season for us. The yields, typical yields, depending on the country, is 70 to 80 tons per hectare. In Europe and America, we use 100% mechanical harvesting. The season for harvesting, so the beet campaign itself, is only 4 to 5 months. sometimes even less, and therefore you can see that there is always a need for capital utilization because this campaign is so short. Some factories is able to store the intermediate evaporated syrup juice, so they do another campaign, a syrup campaign in the summertime. This is usually 1 to 2 months. Right, look at the factory, although I'm not going to go into the factory. If you look at the bottom bar, there is a list of the byproducts. As I said, the beet comes into the factory with a lot of soil. It could be ideally 4%, but we could sometimes get up to 17, 20% if it's raining or if it's in a lot of clay type soil. The soil is separated in either water or a dry separation plant, and the soil can then be composted or can be valorized. For example, when the Olympic Games was in the United Kingdom, the Olympic Village in London was completely constructed from topsoil from British sugar. The stones coming from the fields, and there is quite a lot of them, is also separated in different sizes, and this is used in the construction industry or just for making roads. Any weeds or tops coming in with a beet will normally go to a biogas, or it becomes animal feed for the farmers. The pulp, and this is probably the most important byproduct or co-product, the pulp is currently animal feed, and it's quite an important animal feed. We'll look at that a bit more just now. The process itself uses a double carbonatation process in which we use milk of lime, and most factories will have a lime kiln on site that they operate to produce both the milk of lime and carbon dioxide that is used in the carbonization process. The co-product from this is lime cake, so very similar to filter cake from a cane factory, but this is full of precipitated calcium carbonate with a high pH, and therefore it's very good as a soil conditioner and a pH conditioner. Most factories would also have a bioethanol from either juices or molasses or intermediate juices, syrups to produce bioethanol and vinasse. Sugar would be mostly white sugar products, and then of course heating and electricity. But this lists the products again, but on the right-hand side you can see the beet is 75% water. And therefore, we produce, for every ton of sugar we produce about 4 tons of water. And that becomes quite important if you need to dispatch that water back into a river system where the water needs to be treated. About 18% sucrose, we go up to 20% at the moment. Non-sucrose by around 3%, and then fiber 4%. Right, so beet pulp, the most important product at the moment. Composition, you can see there, it also contains some fatty acids, proteins, and minerals. First of all, the beet is sliced into these thin strips called cassettes. After extraction, the pulp is pressed to about 30% dry substance, and this pulp is then the first animal feed product. Unfortunately, this pulp is not very stable, so within 2 to 3 days, you will need to dispatch it to the farmers or to the feed users. The pulp can be dried further, up to 88%, and in this form, it will be stable for quite a bit longer. The primary use is animal feed for ruminants, so cows, goats, and sheep. It's particularly good for milk cows, as it enhances the amount of milk that the cows produces, so it forms part of the human food chain. The wet pulp can be stored in silos. This would be under anaerobic conditions so that the lactic acid produced will give you some protection against the microbes, or it's dried and pelleted. Of course, technically, we could dry this pulp to 50% dry substance and then burn it in a boiler, the same as with bagasse. This is not done anywhere because of the dependence of the feed industry on beet. But this is also important in that if you want to find an alternative use for beet pulp, you would need to, first of all, at least get the same revenue as the animal feed market, and you would need to then find an alternative feed for the industry. There has been, of course, in the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years, and it is probably because of 2 reasons: the escalating cost of carbon dioxide emissions in Europe especially, and then also the recent increase in the cost of fossil fuels has caused a lot of companies to stop the drying operations. So for example, my company used to dry 80 to 90% of the pulp. At the moment, we only dry 40% of it, and therefore the wet pulp needs to be dispatched to customers very quickly. But there's always an additional, therefore, a surplus pulp that is now suddenly available for diversification. And so this has driven the industry to again start to look at other uses of beet pulp. Lime cake fertilizer, I think, is quite interesting. We produce the precipitated calcium carbonate in the factory. In the 2 pictures, the first one, you can see what milk of lime looks like if you just bubble carbon dioxide through it. It's very nice crystals, let's say, with a high surface area, and it's highly absorptive. If you add the impurities from the beet juice to it, then you can see the second picture, which is a stereo microscope image. The particles are very consistent, between 20 and 40 micron, and this is really good for as a soil conditioner and as a fertilizer. Right, beet molasses is similar to cane molasses, obviously, except it's not very palatable for humans. So the pH of beet molasses is about 9, so it's got a very soapy taste, and humans don't like that. It also has a lot of bitter tastes and odors. The animals haven't complained so far, but humans certainly do not like having that. The molasses at the moment is really good as a fermentation stock. We all know about the sucrochemistry drive that started in the 70s already, I think. We are starting to see a renewed interest in making chemicals from sucrose. If you use beet molasses, though, you have a very impure substance, but this, of course, then gives you opportunities in the fermentation industry. And I think, especially in Europe, you see a lot of fermentation applications or developments on substrates like beet molasses to be able to make fine chemicals or specialty chemicals. Beet molasses is particularly good for yeast compared to cane molasses, and it's because of the high nitrogen content, so it is very good in terms of nutrients. Chromatographic separation of the molasses has always been interesting. In the United States of America, every beet factory has a chromatographic separation plant, either for recovery of sucrose or for betaine or any one of the other components that I mentioned there. All right, so what is new, therefore? So first of all, beet pulp, as I said, is becoming more available. And so we're seeing quite a lot of work in this area. You can see the components on the right. First of all, the beet pulp itself has some functionalities that is interesting in the materials and construction industry. You can use beet pulp as a fiber and paper and board, but the functionality is quite a bit different from your traditional fibers. And so therefore, you cannot just replace it. It would need to be developed into some specialty products. For example, the beet has a very high water absorption or water retention index, and therefore it's very interesting in these types of applications, but it would need to be developed. And then, of course, as a food fiber, beet pulp is always interesting. The pulp can be, or extraction of valuable products has been investigated probably for the last 30 years and has now started to see commercial applications. Arabinan, ferulic acid, and other antioxidants, but also flavonoids and flavonols can be extracted quite easily. And then the pulp can be converted into valuable compounds through hydrolysis, either chemical or enzymatic. typical products, xylose, mannose, glucose, galactose, and then pectin hydrolysis is quite interesting for the production of oligosaccharides, which are probiotics. Further beet pulp, there's a huge interest in being able to extract cellulose nanofibers. These fibers are particularly strong and tough, and they have qualities that are useful in nanopapers and nanocomposites, and also because they are biocompatible and renewable. They are starting to get a lot of attention. And of course, then hemicellulose can be converted to furfural, very similar to in the cane industry. Other fermentation pathways can be done, and especially lactic acid, which is a platform chemical for bioplastics. All right. Biomethanization, I think, is quite interesting. Over the last 10 years in Europe, we have started to see a lot of these biomethane, or these are the gas collection units going up, especially on the farms. These are relatively small units that will produce biogas, so methane, from almost anything that a farmer can put in there, including beet pulp. Quite important for these is that the capital cost of the investment is quite high, and therefore this has been driven by government incentives and also European Union incentives to be able to allow the farmers to produce their own energy for their farming operations, and then running that right through the year. This is usually co-fed with other farm wastes. Interesting, just the bottom picture there, you also see quite a bit of biomethanization in shops, especially fruit shops, where this unit that I'm showing at the bottom, it was produced in the UK. And this unit produces the biogas, but it also cleans it up and then puts it through an alternator to produce electricity. So the shop is with their own product completely free from the grid. For sugar factories, you do get the high capital cost is certainly a big problem, but you get factories, usually one factory per group, that would have biomethanization. Of course, because the campaign is so short, your availability of beet pulp would be limited to 3 or 4 months unless you can store it properly. And so capital utilization or a need to substitute with other biomass materials is quite important. All right, I want to end off just with some examples, because I think that would probably be more interesting, of some factories or some companies that have already started to move into the biorefinery concept. The first company, in my paper, I'm giving you the name. I just didn't want to stand up here and give you the name of one of our competitors. It's a company in the UK, so you can probably guess who that is. For the last probably decade or two, they have been operating a greenhouse outside of their biggest factory. And the greenhouse is, throughout the winter, would be fed by residual heat or waste heat from the factory. You can see in the picture those pipes on the ground is simply pipes that contains water from the factory to keep the temperature perfect, but they are also putting some of the excess carbon dioxide from the factory into the greenhouse to generate the optimum carbon dioxide level for the growth of, in this case, it used to be tomatoes. At the moment they are, 3 years ago, they were the UK's biggest producer of tomatoes. They currently operate the biggest greenhouse in the country. This factory, just to complete the picture, also produces ethanol through fermentation from both juice and molasses. They separate the vinasse into betaine and 1 or 2 other valuable components. They compost their soil, as I've mentioned earlier. They produce biogas from both beet pulp and from anaerobic digestion of their wastewaters. The second company operates out of Germany. The Zeit factory is the one I wanted to focus on, has been a sugar factory or sugar beet factory since 1858. This factory today receives 4 different raw materials, And this is to extend the Beet campaign from just receiving Beet and then so that they can operate throughout the year. Their products includes, or their main product is sugar, starch, and ethanol, but they also have a variety of products, including a CHP plant to exchange electricity with the grid. They produce animal feed, fertilizers, liquid carbon dioxide from their fermentation and operations, and biogas. What is interesting about this company is that they are simultaneously busy developing a number of other processes for this specific factory, and they have outlined it quite recently at the European Sugar Society. They are working on lactic acid to be able to produce biopolymers, other bio-based polymers, amides and polyesters, ethanol-based derivatives, which are becoming increasingly important as renewable chemicals, biogenic carbon dioxide, green methanol, and succinic acid. And then the last company, I'll call it Company C, but I'm going to give you their name because it is quite an important part of the message, I think. XXXI, which is the sugar union in the Netherlands, was a union since 1899, basically a cooperative of farmers. They have 2 years ago changed the company's name, and this was to reiterate and to put emphasis on their commitment to become a beet processing company, a proper biorefinery company that can valorize the beet into different components and also valorize the beet 100% and become a beet technology giant. So in addition to the normal products, including bioplastics, paper, and fibrous products, they have in the last 2 years started to produce or to commission a biorefinery, proper beet pulp biorefinery, where they are separating out microcellulose fibers, arabinose, and galacturonic acid. Now, really important here, I think, is they acknowledge that the separation of the microcellulose fibers would not be financially viable if it wasn't for the low volume and high value to other products that they are producing as well. So really important that the message is that these chemicals from renewable sources are struggling to compete with our fossil partners, and it's important to acknowledge that and make sure that the funding is available. They've also in the last 2 years started to operate a pilot plant. This was a European Union funded project that remarkably involved companies and universities from 8 different countries in Europe. I've now operated for 2 years. They are collecting and then also separating the beet leaves from the fields. You can see they get between 5 and 8 tons of biomass per hectare that is left in the field. At the moment, it's either consumed by animals or plowed back into the field. They are isolating the Rubisco protein, and as I said, it's been a successful pilot plant for 2 years, and they are busy with plans to take this further. Right, I have no conclusions, so I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Barbara. You've given us a lot of thought, and you've given us sugar beet co-products 101, I think. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have our last speaker, and we'll then start asking questions after that. So I'll now introduce our third and last speaker for today. Dr. Louis-Jean-Claude Autrey has been involved in the scientific research and development for some 55 years. He served in the Mauritius Sugarcane Industry Research Institute, MSRI, for 40 years from 1967 to 2007, and was its director from 1996 to 2007. Dr. Autrey has worked for the University of Mauritius in various capacities and was appointed Chancellor in 2015. He is presently the General Secretary of the International Society of Sugarcane Technologists. I'm sure you're all aware of that. and of which he's been the chair of the pathology section, the commissioner for biology, the chair of the technical program, chair of the executive committee and council. Jean-Claude has been the author of some 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers and more than 100 expert reports. He has greatly contributed to the advancement of the knowledge of agricultural crops, including sugarcane. Dr. Autrey has visited some 60 countries, mostly in relation to sugarcane production, and has taught sugarcane production to professionals for more than 40 nationalities. He was made an honorary life member of the ISSCT 2010. The topic for Professor Dr. Jean-Claude Autrey is characteristics of specialty and physiological-enhanced refined sugars produced in Mauritius, favorable to good health.
Thank you.
Jean-Claude, you've got the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to express our thanks to ISSCT TPC for allowing us to make this presentation. And also, we have to thank you for taking time to be with us today. The title of my presentation is on the screen. It is different from the two other presentations in the sense that it is a report on a study. This study was carried out in Mauritius. My two co-workers are in the room, Salem Somtali and Asha Somtali, and the fourth is not in this Congress, is in Mauritius. Now, before we come to the topic itself, just some background on Mauritius sugar industry. Sugarcane was imported by the Dutch at the time they colonized Mauritius, and it was made for production of arak, which is rum. Sugar production was little, and by the time they left, you see they produced 1 ton of sugar and 6,000 liters of arak. Now, we were then colonized by the French. The French developed the industry. The first crop was 1745, and by the time the French left, in fact, by the time the British conquered Mauritius in 1810, there were 4,000 hectares of cane and about 80 factories. But the economy, as you will see here, it was not only cane, but there was a lot of other crops than cane. Then came the British. The British came in 1810, and they really developed the industry. They first came in indentured labor for the first time in 1834, abolition of slavery, which provided the human resources from the indentured labor. By the turn of the century, we had, at some point in time, we have 259 factories. They were, of course, small factories. By the turn of the century, we had rationalized the industry. Then, by 1950, and even we were at about 500,000 tons of sugar, which is, how did this happen? This happened because there was a considerable jump in production between the 1950s, due especially to the production of a fantastic variety from the POG 2878, which is the miracle cane. Now, we have a very structured industry with a lot of institutions, and we have been one of the first countries in the world to have organized research in 1893 on sugarcane. Now, by the time of independence, sugar was the mainstay of the economy. It was called king sugar. It was 30% of the GDP, 90% of the value of export. The record production was in 1973 with some 719,000 tons of sugar, but our all-time record in terms of productivity was a bit later. And there was the sugar protocol between 1975 and 2005. Now, the industry had to face various, I would say, competitive factors. The end product is that sugar production was reduced. From king sugar, we came citizen cane, and the sugar in the GDP was only 0.5% last year, and the value of export, 5.6%. Now, the industry has diversified. The sugar output has decreased, but the diversification in the industry has been considerable. First of all, we have had, I would say, diversification within the industry. From the field to the factory, which was a simple operation, the industry became very sophisticated. We were the first to produce sugar sold to the GRI in 1957. Now we have ethanol plants, and obviously we have scope for other industrial units taken into consideration, for example, the energy which is available. What I'm going to talk to you about is this red sphere today, which is about the specialty sugars. But as an ending note on this first part, the sugar industry is in interface with other crops. For example, here it is palmito. We have very, very delicious palmito species. We are working on many species for biomass production, etc. But what the industry did is that it went out of sugar and it invested in hotel, tourism, textile, bank, universities, integrated malls, etc. So the industry, although the value of sugar itself in the economy has decreased, but the value of the industry in the economy is considerable. Now, to the study itself, it is a study that concerns 16 special sugars, what we call Mauritian sugars. Now, we used to produce raw sugar only until the abolition of the sugar protocol when we went to refined sugar. But since the 1970s, we have started to produce specialty sugars, and today we produce more than 20,000 specialty sugars. We produce more specialty sugars than we produce refined sugar, and these sugars are exported to 55 countries, which means there is a demand, and we have acquired a lot of expertise. So this study will concern 16 of these specialty sugars, 1 raw sugar, 1 industrial cane sugar, 4 non-commercial brown sugars, 1 white refined sugar, and 2 imported commercial sugars marketed as low GI. Now, we characterize those sugars according to color, pole, ash, reducing sugars, moisture, pH, sodium, potassium, protein, indicator value, which is the total sum of antioxidants and phenols. We also characterize the antioxidant properties of those 24 sugars and their glycemic index. Now, we use 2 methods for determining the antioxidant activity. They are known in the field. This is the BTS radical scavenging assay and what is known as FRAP, ferric reduction antioxidant power assay. We also determine the glycemic index, and we followed the ISO 26642 2010 protocol with 2 specialized laboratories, one in South Africa and one in the UK. Now, at the scale of our lab, what we did is that we actually recovered antioxidant compounds from clarified juice. We did that by using 2 columns. The first column was packed with a non-ionic polymeric absorbent supplied by Tereos from India, while the second column was packed with a strong acid antication exchange, resin also supplied by Tereos. These are the 2 columns. And after a repeated cycle of extraction, finally we concentrated the antioxidant by evaporation, and we used these in blending with white refined sugar. What are the results? What we found is that there was what I should say is that no study had ever been done before on such a range of special sugars. So color range, they range from 37 Icumsa to 51,000. The highest color value was 51,000 for sugar 5, followed by sugar 2, 31,000, and sugar 6, 19,000. The lowest color value, of course, was 37 for Mauritian white refined sugar. Now, a lot of figures to cover the 24 sugars, but I would like to concentrate on sugar 2, where you will see the pole is lower, the moisture is higher, the ash is higher, the color is higher, and the same for sugar 5 and for sugar 7. Now, the other table will cover the remaining sugars to make 24, and the only point here, if you look at sugar 24, you will see that the color and the indicator value, which is antioxidant plus phenol, is much higher than the others. Now, when it comes to minerals, reducing sugars and protein contents, again, sugar 2 showed interesting properties, sugar 5 and sugar 6. They also had higher potassium, higher sodium, and higher reducing sugars. Now, the range to come to the 24 sugars on the same properties, you see that sugar 22 was different, both on the score of the potassium and of the reducing sugar. And sugar 22 is a non-commercial sugar, by the way. Now, calorific value, the calorific value was in the range. There was not great variation between the 24 or among the 24 sugars. Now, the antioxidant capacity of sugars, this is where the interesting part is. If you look at sugar 2 again, you will see that it has a much higher value, also for sugar 5, also sugar 6, compared to the other sugars. And when you look down here, you will see sugar 22 also, interesting properties. And when you compare this with a low glycemic sugar from Australia and from India, you will see that those 4 sugars have much higher properties in terms of antioxidant. When you do a correlation between our 2 methods of determining antioxidant properties, you will see that the sugar 5, 6, and 2 are, in fact, outliers. Now, in terms of glycemic index, in fact, what is glycemic index? It's a measure of how quickly a food causes our blood sugar levels to rise. According to international classification, a low GI is if the glycemic index is below 55, a medium 56 to 69, and high GI is above 70. Now to our range of sugars we have studied, you will see here that sugar 5, in terms of test, showed a glycemic index of 59, which is in the medium range. If you compare this to the low sugar from Australia or the low sugar from India, you will see they rather fall. They also fall in the medium range, but they are a bit above. Now, this was done in South Africa. When we look at the results from Oxford Brookes Laboratories, University in the UK, you will see that sugar 8 has a value of 61, but our sugar 5 mentioned before has a value between 47 and 59, which is a mean value of 53, which makes of it a low GI sugar. Now, most sugars, according to the conclusion, I may say, from the GI testing, sugar 24 yielded a weighted average with white sugar of 65. Most Mauritian special sugars were medium. 3 sugars was classified as high. Sugar 5 classified as low. And when sugar 5 was tested twice in the UK, the weighted average was in a value of 53. So it is thus classified as a low GI category food. Now, what we have done in the experimental part in the lab, we extracted antioxidant and we blended the antioxidant with white sugar. When we blended 3,000 milligram per kilo of product, and this was tested in South Africa, and we blended with 6,000 milligram, and this was tested in the UK. The results are, with the 3,000 milligram, the glycemic index of the white sugar was not really decreased. It remains high glycemic index. But when you look at, you increase the concentration twice to 6,000, the actual GI of the white refined sugar is 50. So it is therefore low. So there are things, there are compounds in those extracts that affect this parameter. Our conclusion is that the 24 Mauritian sugars varied in properties, particularly in color, reducing sugar, potassium, and protein contents. Some Mauritian specialty sugars have high antioxidant properties. Sugar 5 gave the highest color value, 51,000, highest K, highest sodium, and reducing sugar values, lowest POL, and highest antioxidant activity, which was determined as being more than 6,000 by TAC method. Sugar 5 clearly showed low GI redundancy, Protocol devised to recover active compounds with high incident activity from sugar juice and used to enhance physiological properties and nutritional value of white refined sugar. So blending extracted antioxidant compounds to refined sugar produce a low GI, high antioxidant product. Finally, sugar 5 has a potential for commercialization as a high-value product, low GI, high antioxidant, high potassium. Some specialty sugars contain only 86% sucrose compared to white refined sugar at 99.9. Minimal refining process of some sugars retain some phytochemicals present in the sugar juice. There are new consumers' preference. This was evoked on Tuesday about low GI foods, antioxidant in foods, etc. So the conclusion, maybe some sugars consumed not in excess can bring added benefits to our health. So sugar is not a danger to health. Acknowledgements, we acknowledge Dr. Salma Musan, who did some of the analysis, and Dr. Michael Saska, who guided us. This was financed in part by the Mauritius Research Innovation Council, by Omnicane Limited. The CEO is in the room, I wish to thank him, and the Mauritius Cane Industry Authority, to whom the MSIRI belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. I'm now going to open the floor for questions. We did start 10 minutes late, so it has shortened the amount of time we've got for questions, but we've still got a fair amount. So, can we have the microphone here, please? Please identify yourself and try and keep the questions to the point.
B.H. Shrikant, Pune. I would like to raise 2-3 issues to first two speakers. This is to Mr. Narendra Mohan. Very nicely explained viscera of diversification of sugar and allied industries. But what is the availability of that established technology? Some technologies are there in infant stage in the country on lab scale or pilot scale. No private investor will come forward to accept this technology unless and until it is well proven on industrial floors. Okay, this is the first problem I would like to bring to your notice. Okay. Secondly, still it is shameless on our part that still we are approaching small countries like Hungary, South Korea, and Japan to import those established technologies for specialty chemicals from starch, sugar, or molasses. So we have to insist upon CSR. There are 38 R&D organizations under CSR, and we have to insist upon those scientists to develop these technologies on industrial floors. This is first. And to second speaker of Mr. Moore, you have mentioned protein extraction from sugar beet leaves. The lamina or sugar beet leaf has typical composition of cellulosic network plus water content plus chloroplasts containing chlorophyll A, B, C. And the protein content is very less. So is it economically viable to extract that protein on industrial scale from sugar beet leaves with very less quantity of protein? Second point, you have mentioned betaine is extracted from beet molasses. Is it on lab scale or pilot scale or industry is well established there in your country to extract betaine from beet molasses?
Would you like?
So, I'm audible, I think. Yeah. Your question is about
Availability of technology.
whether we do have the out-of-shelf technologies or not. Because I have spoken about number of value-added products. Yes, I have spoken about number of value-added products. For most of them, we do have the out-of-shelf technologies. For some of them, we may not be having today. But I'm confident that tomorrow we are going to have the technologies, the right technologies at right place. It is important for the institutes and the industry to work together in cohesion. Only then we can take out all these technologies from lab to field. Basically, you are talking about, developing the technologies on laboratory scale, taking on pilot plant scale, and then on commercial exploitation purposes.
Yeah.
For that, industry has to come forward. Because the million-dollar question is, we want to be sustainable, competitive, and viable. The only route is to think beyond sugar and to have a out-of-box thinking. So I think in times to come, the industry has got a learning, and we are going to have more and more, participation from the industry to commercialize these technologies.
Okay, another thing, NSI has developed this nano silicon, okay?
Yes.
Which is very, very value-added products for the electronic industry.
Right.
We have to insist upon the CSIR scientists to develop this technology on industry scale, so as then only the industrialists will come forward to accept that technology.
So we have already tied up with National Research Development Corporation, which is a Government of India enterprise for commercialization of all these technologies. Yes, we can have the participation from the CSIR institutes as well.
Thank you.
Barbara, do you want to answer the question?
Thank you. Yes, so the extraction of, or let's say isolation of betaine from molasses or from vinasse is a well-established technology. We're lucky in beet, there's a lot of betaine that comes in with the beet, and it simply goes right through the process without being touched. So it's not taken out or converted in any of the steps. And so it ends up in the molasses, and it can be taken out in chromatography, which is well established.
Do we have an... Can we take the microphone there, please? Please identify yourself and keep the question short.
Yeah, I'm Pradeep Khandelwal from Triveni. Yeah, my question is with Mr. Claude Autrey. Yeah, Mr. Autrey, you have told about the potash content and sodium content is high in your sugar in Mauritius.
Sorry, can you just speak a bit slower and a bit up? We can't understand the question so far.
Okay. My question is with Mr. Autrey. He was telling about this sugar potash content and sodium content is high in sugar, very high in Mauritius sugar. So what is the keeping status of the sugar in Mauritius? Do you have any additional facilities for that?
Sorry, are you talking about keeping quality of the sugar?
Yeah, of the sugar, with the high potash content and sodium content.
Well, the keeping quality is fine because they are exported to 55 countries. To make their way around the globe, it is in the, my answer is in your question, because they wouldn't be exported to 55 countries if they were not sought out, having appropriate shelf life, etc. They were not, and they were not stable.
Not able to hear you, please. I'm not able to hear you.
What he's trying to convey that they are exporting the sugar to 55 odd countries, and they have never faced any such problem of deterioration or the shelf life. I think I'm clear. Dr. Autrey, can you elaborate, keeping the mic near to your face?
So just to give you, there is, if you do sugar technology, there's a standard storage factor that is available. It's called the safety factor. And it's really easy. You just got to look it up in the books, and you measure the qualities, and you'll be able to understand how to keep your sugar. So it's important safety factor. So go and have a look at Dr. Peter Ryan's book.
In conclusion, this is not an issue for the special sugars of Mauritius.
Sorry, are there any other questions I can't see at the moment? Can we go right to the back there to Arvind?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
That's right.
Better. Three very eclectic collections of papers. Can I ask two mutually exclusive questions to Narendra and Barbara? Narendra, I mean, your strategies reflect, I would say, low-hanging fruit rather than sort of high-value, low-volume products that the industrial biotechnology is currently offering. So I was wondering whether this reflects the ability of the sugar industry to exploit new technologies, or that there is a compelling case for government incentivizing the sector beyond the biofuels for the emerging bioeconomy. Barbara, I was just wondering whether you want to care to comment about the incentivization of the bioeconomy sector in the EU through various funding initiatives. One of them, as you know, is pulp to value. Thank you.
Arvind, what we are looking at, Indian sugar industry is to go in for integration and involving many other industries. They cannot do all the work of their own. We are looking into, bioenergy, and we are trying to have more and more value-added product from the sugar industry. Say I quoted few, like particle board or the eco-ware crockery, or you may be talking about the biochemicals or blah, blah, blah. So what, the government of India is aspiring for, they need a wider participation from other sectors. There is a MSME sector, the micro, small, and medium sector, where we can work on different models like the PPP models and involving, other stakeholders and other industries too. I don't think any technology is a deterrent, and we can have the technologies, required for taking all these products forwards. I have spoken about only few products which do have the technology, which do have the market, and where we do have the viability.
Thank you, Arvind. I think I understood your question about funding available in the European Union for these types of, let's say, diversification. It's a fantastic time to be in the sugar industry in Europe at the moment, because it has been recognized that if we were to make chemicals and probably not all the fuels, but let's say chemicals from plant-based materials, then the top two plants is sugarcane and sugar beet, compared to the yields and carbon, the carbon yields from other plants. And so there is a lot of different financial schemes available. We have the Green Deal, and then a number of committees on that makes the funding available to, or through mechanisms that hasn't been there in the past. And this is to make sure that you don't just give funding to people that will be developing nice, novel technologies, but to make sure that the technologies will actually find application in the industry. So there's been a big change in that. I don't know if you wanted, if that answers your question, or...
We've got room for one more question. I can see that nobody wants to ask any more questions, so it is lunchtime. It's 12:30 exactly on my watch. So at this moment in time, I believe there's going to be a presentation to the speakers. Jasmine, you want to say something?
I would like to thank all our distinguished speakers and the chair for imparting such valuable knowledge on the topic. A huge round of applause for all of them. I would now take the privilege of inviting Mr. Ranjit Puri, Chairman, ISSCT Heavy Engineering Limited, to kindly facilitate our distinguished speakers with the mementos. A round of applause for all of them, please. With this, we'd like to conclude the session. Please join us for lunch.
Just remember, we've got a poster session at 1:30, and then at 2 o'clock we start the session promptly. Thank you.